Hello, my friends. Lori Ashcroft here. I'm your host for Viva la Evolution. Thank you for joining us. We are sponsored by Recovery and Resilience Solutions, which is a training and consulting branch of Crestwood Behavioral Health. And we have some other lovely sponsors too, and I just want to thank all of them, including Rutgers University and the Alliance. So, okay, we have an amazing program for you today. I want to show you this book by Patrick Kennedy. So I bought this book and read it, and this is a book of stories of people recovering. So there's one story in here that just really got to my heart. Story by a person named Miss Tonie. And I didn't think much more of it. I went to a conference and Tonie was there. And Sarah Brown introduced me to her. And oh gosh, it was just so wonderful to meet her and to hear her story in person. So of course I asked her if she'd be willing to come on, share her story with all of us so you guys could hear it too. So that's who we're talking to today. We're talking to Tonie, and she has a remarkable story. So I don't want to take up any more time. Let's go listen to Tonie. Okay, my friends. So here we are with the amazing Tonie. And as I told you how I came to know about her, what a precious being she is. I know you're going to love hearing from her. And Tonie, before you get started, tell us about your T-shirt.
Oh, so my T-shirt is from the Justice Peer Initiative that was started by Helen Skipper.
And yes.
I am actually I'm one of her board members, and it's about nothing about us without us.
Yeah.
And so this came from one of the conferences that we did recently at St. Francis College, where all the peers were in attendance. It was an amazing gathering. It was nice.
Yeah.
This peer business has been a long time in the making, and I'm so glad to finally see that it is coming to fruition.
Yes. You know, I met Helen Skipper a year ago.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was 1 year ago or 2 years ago. But what an amazing woman she is. I should have known you two were in cahoots.
Yeah, definitely in cahoots. Definitely in cahoots.
And what are you doing now, Tonie? What's your job these days?
So right now I'm working for cases. I have been with the Center for Alternative Sentencing and Employment Services for the last October 19th. It's going to be 9 years. I have been gainfully employed. I also work for Transitional Services Incorporated, and that also deals with mental health, substance abuse, and homelessness. And TSI's case, I'm at the respite, so I work with individuals that come in crises.
Wow.
For cases, I work with individuals that have been arrested and come in contact with the law, and instead of being incarcerated, we try to connect them to services in the community. So direct hands-on work is what I'm doing.
How lucky are they to have someone like you who's been down this road before a few times?
I think I'm the lucky one.
Yeah.
I think I'm the lucky one.
I know what you mean.
The reason that I say that I'm the lucky one is because this was something that I was saved from. I was spared from the repetitiveness of thinking that things are going to change. Once I started taking an active, honest look at myself in recovery, I knew that there wasn't any changing unless I became an intricate part of that change.
Right. It's such an important part.
Yes.
You know, I really celebrate with you where you are today and know you're making just an amazing contribution. But it was a long and scary route to get there. Can you tell us a little bit about your recovery story?
Where to start?
Mhm.
My life was shambles. It was upside down and discombobulated. And when I was getting admitted to psychiatric hospitals, they weren't asking me questions because I was big. I came in out of control. And the first thing that they were doing was shooting me up with Thurazine. They didn't care if I was having flashbacks or watching them cut my little brother from underneath the car where his body was entwined. They didn't care if I was having flashbacks of being molested by my mom's boyfriend and her walking in and going out. And the man was in the bed with my mom the very next morning. She's making breakfast. They didn't care about any of that. They didn't ask any questions. They just shot me up with Thurazine because I was violent and I was out of control.
Mhm.
When I was released from hospitals, someone always had to come and get me and sign me out to, and say that they were going to be responsible for me taking my medication. Well, crack was my medication, and no one was going to make me do anything different than that because that was my forget sauce. That was my memory lapser. I didn't need anything else. And that's the road that I stayed on. And so I keep that in mind when I'm dealing with my participants in my program and when I'm dealing with individuals coming through the respite in a crisis. Oh, um, I guess like many addicts, I was the last one to know really that I had a problem. Um, I abused drugs for over 25 years. I was homeless during that time. You know, I would couch surf with friends. I have one friend that would sneak me into her boyfriend's house so I could shower, you know, catch some sleep. But for the most part, I was homeless. When I had a place that I called my own, it was actually the drug house where I sold drugs at. So it wasn't mine because the police could kick the door in anytime they felt like it and arrest me. And so it wasn't my own. It was a journey. I wasn't involved with family. That was a definite choice. The beginning of my time, I grew up as an abused child, physically, mentally, you know, emotionally, just abused. Molestation is a big part of my journey. And I think that for me, substance abuse was that numbing factor that I needed. So I didn't have to think about anything because when I started using, I didn't have to think about anything and I didn't have to think about anyone. My first set of children, my first children's father moved me from my mom's house when I was 15. I had my own place. When I was 16, I had my first child. By the time that I was 18, I had 3 children. And I've never been a girl that believed in abortion. You know, we were raised Jehovah's Witness, and in that religion, there is no abortion. So I wasn't using back then. I didn't know that. I didn't know anything about mental health back then either, though. Um, when overwhelming emotions of guilt would overcome me, the more guilty I felt, the more that I used. And the children were a byproduct. My children that I had during my addiction were a byproduct of me escaping because the bottom line is I never wanted to be a parent. I never wanted to have children because I never wanted to be my mom.
So,
Okay.
Tonie, I'm remembering too that you kind of were a parent very early in your life because you raised your 4 or 5 brothers
Yeah.
single-handedly, and you were just the kids yourself.
Yeah, my mom was planning to move to New York, and but even before the move, like I was responsible for my brothers. That they were my responsibility to get them up, get them dressed for school. That was my responsibility to cook, to make sure that the house was clean. It was my responsibility. Unfortunately, I have a brother that was killed. He was struck by a car. Um, for so many years, I blamed myself for that because I'm the one that crossed him over to the other side of the street. And so for a lot of years, I blamed myself for that. And hearing my mom on the day that my brother died tell me that it was my fault didn't help matters at all. And for me, you know, I wasn't really a person that was good at expressing myself.
Mm-hmm.
So everything I held inside, I think that um, shortly after that, I had my first suicide attempt where I took an overdose of pills, and I woke up and I was like, well, dang, I can't even kill myself right. Like, I can't do anything right. And when you spend a lifetime hearing, that you're not anything, you're not worth anything, you kind of tend to believe that.
Yeah.
And so when my mom moved to New York, my brothers were left with me and my boyfriend, my children's father.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they stayed with us for a few years. And then my mom sent for them and we took them to the airport and shipped them to New York. And I wouldn't see my brothers again until I was in my 20s, and I had my fourth child by then already, different person. Um, and me still not connecting dots, knowing that maybe something is a little bit off upstairs, because my fifth child, I met her father in a day and left the state and went with him and left my fourth child behind in South Carolina. So it's like I was just having children and just leaving them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah, during my
You were
yeah.
pretty heavy into drugs at the time, weren't you? Still trying to escape?
I wasn't using drugs before I went to Texas. When I moved back to New
Okay.
York, in my 20s, I
Okay.
met a lady in my mom's building. By this time, I have 5 children by this time. I have 5 children.
Wow.
And I only have one child with me. And
Mm-hmm.
that's my fourth child. I have her with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I came to New York and I started messing around with my brother's friends. And I had a baby with him that made baby number 6. And then I had a baby with a neighbor downstairs that made baby number 7. And during this around the time that I started getting high in
Mm-hmm.
my 20s. And I left everything behind one day. All kids, all everything. I just left everything behind because my first encounter with using substances became such a feeling that I didn't have to think about anything or anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to be responsible for anything or anybody.
Yeah.
I didn't have to think about being a failure as a mom, because who has children and then abandons their children? Like, to me, I was a horrible person.
Oh, yeah.
That's how I felt
Mm-hmm.
about myself. And so my journey with addiction took off. And the more that I used, I think that every year or every other year, I was pregnant. I'm not really sure about that time span. I'm not going to lie to anybody and say, oh, yeah, I remember when the kids were conceived. Oh, yeah, I know who the dads are. I'm not going to tell anyone a lie and say that. The fact of the matter is, the children were a casualty of my addiction.
Yeah.
And that is the truth. Um, that is the truth. I pray for opportunities to one day meet the children. I have to first find out how many children there are indeed.
Mm-hmm.
That is a goal. I just talked to my therapist yesterday and I told him that I think that I'm ready to begin the journey. I want to make sure that I can begin the journey without having any thoughts of using, without having any thoughts of being a failure, without it mentally affecting me. Um, but I would like to meet my children and apologize to them the same way that I apologize to the children that I have relationships with, because I do have relationships with some children, and I'm a grandmother to some children. And um, what I've learned over these years is that I would have been an amazing freaking mom. The
Well,
fear,
yeah.
yeah,
You
the
are
fear.
now.
I
You know,
am,
you're an amazing mom right now.
yeah,
It's really to your credit, Tonie, because you could have just chalked all that up to, a very challenging childhood. the need to numb out and just gone on your way. But you've done a lot of work to reconnect with those children.
Accountability is big for me. I
Yeah.
believe in accountability. Um, I teach accountability in my job.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm holding others accountable, I should be the first one to stand in line and be able to ask for forgiveness. I'm a very spiritual person. I know that God has forgiven me,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that I have to ask for forgiveness. It's nothing that I can move forward and not do. For all of my children that I have contact with today, I have apologized. I've asked for forgiveness, and I have asked to be a part of their lives, which they have graciously provided me that space.
Yeah. And I think, did I see that one of your children has a Facebook page or something? It's called Tony's Kids.
My
And
mini
they're helping you find your other kids.
my mini me
Okay. Yeah.
has a post up, she has a page. I'm not allowed on the page. It's only for siblings.
Yeah.
And hopefully people will see the page. When I walk down the street, sometimes I see people, young men, young women, and I think like, wow, could that be one of my kids?
Hmm.
Working in the court systems, I think, wow, could this be one of my children? Because to my understanding, when the children were adopted, the names changed. And
Mhm.
so I wouldn't even know where to start, but I thank God for Paul because he's going to help me with
Oh,
that.
good. Good. Is it time now to talk about Paul?
We're going to talk about Paul.
Okay.
So I was in treatment, and I wanted to get SSI. I couldn't. I didn't. They told me that I would have to go. I, uh, they disqualified me from being able to work. And
Okay.
so they told me that I could go and apply for Social Security, but I had to meet with a mental health specialist. And I'm saying to myself, like, mental health, I don't have mental health issues. What do I need to meet with a mental health? But I'm also saying, but this is going to be monthly money. This is
Yeah.
monthly income coming in. And so I get down to Varick Street and I go to the floor, and there's this man that comes out and he says, "Hi, I'm Paul, the person that was supposed to see you today called out, so I'm going to be meeting with you today." And my first thought in my mind is like, what is this little white man going to be able to tell me about myself? And then I'm laughing because where I come from, you know, we didn't really integrate.
Yeah.
I grew up in a small town down south, and we were not, white people were not to be trusted.
Yeah.
And here's this little man that's going to try to tell me something about myself. And my only concern was you filling out my paperwork so that I could get my SSI.
Isn't
And
it?
Paul and I have been together from 2010 all the way up until now.
Right.
We are still together every week.
Right.
Every Tuesday, I have
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah. Angels come in interesting disguises, don't
Yes,
they?
they do. And he was definitely my saving grace. He was able to, first of all, allow me to know that anything that ever happened to me in life beyond my control was not my fault. And I wasn't used to that because after being blamed so much for everything that ever happened, how can you now come in and say that it's not my fault? And every day that I left Paul, I used. Every session I had with Paul, I used because I knew what that would be. I didn't know what this journey was going to look like, but I know that it was painful. And I call it my onion peeling time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because for every layer that was peeled back,
Mhm.
but at the end of the peeling, there was such a beautiful transformation to where I wanted to learn more. I didn't have to go out and use.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
drugs became just not the part of me. And what I learned about myself is that addiction was a small part
Yeah.
of my life. If I had a Paul years before that,
Yeah.
things may look so much different. but I never questioned why God does the things the way that he does. Nothing in this world can happen without his knowledge. And so, for whatever reasons I had to go through, I'm
Yeah.
grateful for everything, the up, the down, the good, the bad. I'm grateful.
You know, and until you met Paul, is that the first time you had an inkling that you might have some kind of a mental illness challenge?
When I was in prison, you do the things that the prison bond does, right? And they let if you're coming in and you want to sleep through your bed, you go to the psychiatrist and you tell them this, and they'll give you this, and
I
that's
see.
what I thought. So when they gave me a diagnosis, I didn't pay any attention to it. It's just something you had to go say to the people. So I wasn't really focused, honestly, on if I had a problem or not. I wasn't really
Okay.
focused on it.
Okay. Yeah.
After getting deeper into it with Paul, I really found out, like, yeah, because he would tell me, does this happen? Does this happen? Like, after all the assessments. And yeah, I really had issues with mental health. And a lot of them were probably brought on by the life that I lived as a kid.
Yeah. Probably trauma. Probably
Yeah,
trauma mostly.
definitely trauma.
Yeah.
Definitely
Yeah.
trauma.
I just want to say something to all the therapists out there. Tonie is telling us some very important stuff about how to be with people. And I'm just going to say a few things, Tonie, and then please chime in and help me out. The first thing I'm hearing is that Paul didn't show up with any judgments about you.
No.
He was just there to get to know you.
Yes.
And then over a period of time, he never gave up on you. And you would go out and use and come back, and that didn't stop him. He just hung in there with you the whole time. So I think as therapists, I'm both a person who's struggled with mental illnesses and a therapist, so I can talk bad about both sides. I should say I can talk with some authority about both sides. Therapists, sometimes we want to give up. We want to say, no, this person doesn't have potential, or, when the truth is we're just probably burned out over trying and trying. But what we can hear from Tonie is, don't ever give up. You never know how close you are to that breakthrough moment. And so, Paul, if you're out there, thank you.
Paul had the patience of a saint. I tell him every time that we talk, like, he's my saving grace. He was my saving grace because he believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. I didn't know who I was. I really didn't think that I was worth saving. What am I worth saving? I'm a failure. I failed my children. I failed myself. I've always yearned for the family relationship. The very mom that abused me is the mom that I left my children with. So, like, I looked at myself, really, I was just not a good person. That's the way that I viewed myself. And Paul broke it down to me in layman's terms. And he would never give up on me. He would never I would not go to treatment for 2 weeks. I would miss appointments. He would call me, hey, Tonie, just want to check in, see if you're coming today. I'm not coming. Stop calling me. And I would hang up the phone. I was really nasty to him. And no matter how nasty I was, when he would leave one job, he would take me with him. And all of that let me know that I was worth something. He always let me know that I was worth something. And if I said one day, if this little man can be this invested in me, when am I going to start to be invested in myself? And one day during a session, Paul talked to me about Howie the Harp. But I didn't have a GED. So when he let me know that, I started to work. Because the more that I got to know about Tonie, the more that I knew that Tonie had something to say.
And something to give.
and something to give.
Lots to give back. Well, this might be when we call Sarah into the conversation if we're going to talk about Howie. Are you there, Sarah? So can you introduce yourself, Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Brown, and I was the training specialist at Howie the Harp when Tonie was there.
Okay,
right by the door, right over, to my right, by the door, this big presence. I learned more about Tonie in this interview, reading that book, than I ever knew the whole 6 months that we were there, because we don't like read people's charts or hear theirs. They just come in and you're like a blank slate. It's just like who you are right now is all that matters. We are looking to the future. So I learned a lot more about Tonie today than I ever knew.
Surprise.
But Tonie, tell us what it was like to be at Howie the Harp.
Oh my God. So after I got my GED, I wanted more. And Paul suggested Howie the Harp. And I signed up. I went through the necessary steps. I was accepted into Howie the Harp. And I got there, and there are all these people. And I'll never forget my first day. The instructor said, look to your left and look to your right. Look in front of you and look behind you. Because a lot of these people will not be here. They will not make it through the entire class. And I was such an angry person in class. I didn't like people telling me what to do, even when it was good for me. I didn't like it. If I was talking and I got pulled up for talking in class, I was angry because don't talk to me like that. Don't tell me to stop talking, and I just came through with so much of my own BS is what I came through the door with. I have to be honest and say that. But Howie the Harp was a place that changed my life. Sarah was, I'm not going to say that I was a bully, but like she said, I was a big presence and I knew that. And so I did not make her life easy. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I love you. But they took the time to listen and meet me exactly where I was. I never threatened anyone. I never put my hands on anyone. But reacclimating myself into society began in Howie the Harp. Learning what it was to listen to guys like Mike Lesser talk about the amygdala hijack, listening to, all the instructors. Sarah was great. Like we had other instructors that would come in and they would talk. And the longer that I was in class, the more that I learned about myself. It wasn't now about me thinking about anyone else. It was about the more that I learned about myself. And there was this one woman that was in class, and I hated this woman with a passion because she would come in class and she would get in a chair, and a chair much like the one that you're sitting in, and she would fall asleep. And I hated this woman. But at one portion of Howie the Harp, they had the self-disclosure where we had to write and then we had to talk in front of the class about ourselves. And it was in that moment that I realized the disdain that I had for this woman was because she was so much like me. It was like a mirror image of seeing myself. And to this day, me and this woman are still good friends. We travel together. And, Howie the Harp teaches you how to use your lived experiences to assist someone else that's coming behind you. So what they gave me, when I met this little lady, Pam was our writing instructor to teach us about how to write the notes. And everybody would say, Sarah would say, make sure that you would pay attention to Pam. What Pam is teaching is going to be very important. And in my mind, I used to say, whatever, Sarah, like you was always telling us something. But it really turned out to be Pam was the most important person in Howie the Harp because my documentation game is tight. It is tight. And it is all because of Pam. Knowing the proper language to use when you're writing a note. Knowing the proper, Howie the Harp taught me about meeting a person where they are and not where I want them to be. because Sarah Brown met me exactly where I was and not where she wanted me to be. She met me right there at that angry Black woman that had not a clue, And she didn't try to change me. She didn't try to change me. She allowed the process to take place. And for that, and Sarah, I will forever be grateful, because just with that, it gives me opportunity to look at myself without the rose colored glasses, like to take an honest observation and see what other people may be seeing. So it's important today how I present, and Sarah had the ability to not allow me to rattle her when I was in one of my moods. And she would just meet me where I was, like, meet me, you're having a bad day today, I understand, and just go about her business. And I'm like, how dare she walk off on me? I'm talking to her. But I found out that it's just that I don't want to exacerbate the situation. I don't want to make things worse. So let me just remove myself, and then we can talk on another day. And that's actually, Sarah, a practice that I use with my clients every day. Every day I remove myself, and learning, going to Howie the Harp and learning to meet people on their level and exactly where they are doesn't mean that I have to get down and lower myself or lower my standards. And the lesson in that was I have to focus and take an honest look at myself. And that's what I do today. And so I'm grateful for Howie. I'm grateful. I actually still go to Howie the Harp when they're doing internship fairs, and I interview potential interns to come work at cases for
okay. So
I could actually go back in and see the classes in Howie the Harp. Yeah.
So Sarah, what was this like for you?
Yeah. Well, Tonie's class was a boisterous class. It was like, all the classes, you got to understand this here, that we are on the 12th floor in this kind of small-ish room with 40 people crammed in there, and everybody, all the Howie the Harp classes are emotional because, everybody's got their histories and they're coming in with all kinds of rough edges. But Tonie's class was like really big energy. Like, like they had a lot of fire. I will never forget that class. Like every single person. And there was just a largesse about it. Like, big emotions. But, what's interesting is that passion has translated, because I think all of the people in that class, a good number of those people, are out there still rocking it in the field. They had the passion that would kind of like explode in the classroom, but now it's like taken and it got channeled. Tonie had a big energy. I think the point of we like to talk about the social curriculum at Howie the Harp. We have certain structures and we do have certain rules that just kind of mimic the workplace and are trying to get people sort of to get used to those kinds of rules. And it was my job sometimes to enforce that. And yeah, sometimes Tonie would be giving me the business, but there was always heart there. And I think even in the midst of it, there was heart. And I remember who you're talking about, in the chair. There's some shots fired in the class emotionally, but yeah, we just try to strike a balance between just letting people, like, we have to be firm around certain rules, but we also know that there's going to be a certain amount of personality and rough edges that are coming through in the classroom. But it's really like being in that environment teaches people a lot about how to be socially. Because think of how many of us as adults are really ever in a room with the same 40, 30, 25 people. It kind of goes down as the class goes on, for 5 hours a day, like in really close proximity, that you learn a lot about your own triggers, like what irritates you, how to cope with yourself. So I think that class, had a lot of rough edges, but they had a lot of personality, and you could always feel like the heartfeltness. There was anger, but I don't know. Harlem has taught me not to be. Howie the Harp is in Harlem, and that classroom has taught me a lot about being able to be with people's anger. Because I think it's not about, like, I don't see like like when people like have kind of like outbursts or something like that, I see that as very different than kind of like a menacing behavior. You know, when people are being really threatening or something, we really distinguish between that at Howie the Harp. And I don't think if somebody's got a big emotion that that's the same thing as being crazy or being threatening. So we kind of like allow that to happen.
You know what, just to take it back to Tonie, just listening to you and hearing about Paul, and just my own experience with you, Tonie. I mean, I haven't ever seen you angry or anything, but I get that you have a big presence.
I do.
And there's something about you that comes through to Paul, to Sarah, to me. I mean, we can see it. We see it. So you have all these disguises, you know, whether it's whatever they might be, but there's a beautiful part of you that just shines through and hooks us. We're hooked.
I'm happy. I'm happy for the hookness.
I think that Tonie was probably one of the mothers of the group, you know, kind of nurturing people and taking people under their wings, and then also taking a leadership role and kind of being like, hey, this is important, what we're doing here. You know, some people catch fire earlier than other people, and I could see that in Tonie. And I think he even tried to sit down and tell your story at one point. But nothing really happened with that. So I'm really glad that it came to fruition in this other form later on. It feels really good. We knew that there was a powerful story to tell there.
Yeah, a story really filled with hope and love and courage, the courage to be yourself. I mean, all those things that you described, those weren't really you. Those were, you know, addictions or traumas or whatever. But when we have the courage to drop all of it, what you're calling onion rings, and just be ourselves, that's just so courageous. That's all anybody wants from us, is that real part. Yeah.
I think Tonie's everything we hope for at Howie the Harp, you know, that we can take those, you know, use our real life, turn our trauma into triumph, sometimes we say, or, you know, that we can take what we've been through and turn it around. That's the whole spirit of peer support, you know, and is to take that fire, take that pain and channel it into lessons that can be, make a difference for other people. And I think sometimes the worse it is that happened to us, the more we have to give to other people, you know, and you know, that's the miracle, when the worst things that happen to us can be turned around. And then and then we can reach people, like you can reach people that I could never reach. You know, everybody has their own story and their own people that they can serve because of what they've been through. And somebody's who's been through something similar is gonna relate to you, and you're gonna be able to make a difference with that person. And then you're doing that service, that work. I don't want to bring a spiritual thing into it, but to me, it kind of is spiritual, you know?
Well, we can say that here.
Okay.
It is very. I tell anybody on any given day, I am on an assignment. This is not a me job. This is a God job. I am on an assignment. If he brought me through all the trenches that he brought me through, and I'm still here, I'm still smiling. I stay with my mom when I come to New York. I live in Baltimore right now. And I stay with my mom when I come to New York. I teach my mom things about mental health, but I teach them using myself, because I dare not say, well, mom, you know, all of this is because I dare not say that, because my mom is not at a place where she is accepting, right? She, on any given day, we heard saying she raised all of her children. This is how she raised all of her children. And sometimes, you know, I look, but I will never say anything, because I have to say, I don't know what my mom went through. It's not a defense. It's a reality, right? My mom had me at 15. She was pregnant at 14. I don't know what my mom went through, what caused her to be the person that she is. And so if God can forgive me, then who dare I not hold on and not forgive. And there used to be once upon a time that I said I would never forgive my mom. And if she passed away today or tomorrow, I would not go to her funeral. And I meant that with every being in my body. But what I've learned through this road, this journey that I'm on with Paul, what I've learned for myself, because Paul is not always in agreement with me, what I've learned for myself and my spiritual walk is I owe it to someone to be able to forgive. God has forgiven me for my sins. So who am I to now want to withhold a forgiveness? It was given to me freely. And so I extend forgiveness to my mother. Whether she never admits to what she did, that's not on me. And that's not a burden that I'm willing to carry. When my children get in their ways and they want to now bring me back to this guilty point, I have to respectfully let them know, darling, I don't reside there anymore. I have had a change of address. And, my son and I right now are not speaking. Does it hurt me? Absolutely. Am I going to use behind it? Absolutely not. I gave all my children the option. I need you to get yourself a good therapist, because I was a part of the reason that you have this disconnect and this discontentment. It was me. I'm telling you, in order to find yourself, you have to invest in mental health treatment. Get you a therapist. Get you a good therapist and talk about it. You can talk about me. I don't care, because the more that you talk, it empties out the receptacle of garbage that you have inside, and then it allows only the good things to go in. And so that's what I give. That's what I give to my clients. I give it to my children. I give it to my mom. I don't want to be in a place where I'm bitter or I'm angry.
Yeah. But, that just hurts us, doesn't it? If we hold on to bitterness or anger or lack of forgiveness. Tonie, I was hoping you could talk a little bit. Sarah, by the way, you're welcome to stay with us. You can leave if you want.
I just wanted to say one other thing about the energy before you change gears. Cases, we have a long relationship with Cases at Howie the Harp, and they traditionally love our sassiest people. That's one of the things, the trademarks. They like the people with the most fire. They can handle that. And so I really appreciate it. And through this conversation, I'm really seeing, Tonie, how you took that, what you said was anger that you had in the classroom, and you have just turned it outward in a good way, like channeled it into energy and passion. Instead of it seems like the difference is that before it was like inside you, and then now you were given a tool and you took it and ran with it like a flamethrower, and just like are now shooting that in a positive, constructive manner with velocity into the world, into forgiveness, into all of these things that, and you went to a place that could handle your fire. And so I think that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Step out.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us, Sarah. It's been wonderful to spend a few minutes with you. Thank you. Tonie, I think it would be helpful to people if you could tell a little bit about when your daughter was sick and you went to visit her in the hospital, and how all that stuff came back to you and it was almost like a relapse, but it wasn't a relapse. A lot of people struggle with relapse, and if they could hear that story of you having all the ingredients for a relapse and not doing it.
Yeah. Well, I got a call. Well, I was actually on a phone with my cousin in South Carolina and a friend. We're on a 3-way call, and he clicked over, told us to hold on, and when he came back, he was still talking. He was saying, Kelly's in the hospital. And I immediately said, Kelly who? Kelly who's in the hospital? What Kelly is in the hospital? And he said, oh, cuz I forgot you were on the phone. And I said, what are you talking about? Kelly, who is in the hospital? And it was my daughter. Of course, she had a severe asthma attack, and she was placed in ICU, and she was on a ventilator. I tried to get a flight out of Baltimore that night. It was on a Sunday. I will never forget it. It was on a Sunday night, and there were no flights going out. So I got the first flight out Monday morning when I got to South Carolina. And that was my first time going home in over 35 years. It was my first time setting my foot on South Carolina grounds. And my focus was my daughter, but inside it was everything just came rushing back at once. Being back, this was the source of all my pain. This was the escape. This was what I ran from. And yeah, you have thoughts about using. Seeing my baby laying there in the hospital bed, and we hadn't spoken because she's one of my children that I had with my first children's father. And because we already had 2 children, we made a decision to give her to my cousin. So my cousin raised her. So I didn't raise her. And seeing this woman, child of mine, laying in this bed, not knowing if she was going to make it, and tubes everywhere. She's not breathing on her own. There's a machine that's breathing for her. In that moment, I felt like such a failure, because if she'd been with me, but also in that moment, I was a mom that was going to step up for my kid. I'd never been able to do it before, and I'm going to do it now. Every day that I was in South Carolina, I was in her hospital bed, by her bedside. I brought my laptop. I worked from the hospital. I got there as soon as visiting hours started, and I didn't leave until visiting hours was over. I'd never been able to be present for my children before, and I was definitely not going to allow anything to make me not be present. So although, yes, the immediate thought is to run and seek that solace of what you know is going to take away that pain, it was time for me to be an adult and step up and use the tools that I had learned along this journey. I've been on this journey now, no drugs in my life since probably 2013, solid 2013, solid. I went to treatment in 2009. I graduated treatment in 2010. But I had those small lapses in time when I was dealing with Paul.
Yeah.
But I knew that that's not where I wanted to stay. And in this moment, watching my child, I knew that relapse was not the answer. I knew that it was not the answer, because I knew what I was going to get from that side. I needed to learn how to be present and feel through my feelings. Paul was a source for me when I reached out to him and I let him know what was going on.
Well, I think when you got home, I'm remembering you had symptoms that you hadn't had before.
I did. I was very, I had a lot of symptoms. I was very symptomatic when I came back, but it wasn't from wanting to use drugs. It was from my mental status, because all of my trauma was right back in my face. When I got home, I did have an opportunity to say to my relatives, when they would come and visit me at my hotel, that I thought that they knew that my mom was abusing me. I thought that they knew that I was being molested by my aunt's boyfriends, by my mom's boyfriends. And I got to speak my piece, my truth, from the perspective of that little girl that was robbed of being a child. And everybody swears that they didn't know. I don't believe any of them at all. You knew. We lived across the street. How do you not hear a child screaming and the houses are in such close proximity to one another? So as long as I was able to get that piece of garbage out, I felt vindicated. My medication had to be changed, and I had to go into a little more talk therapy, but everything was worth it. I didn't pick up a drug. I'm very proud of myself for that.
Yes, I think you should be very proud. I mean, be proud of yourself anyway, but be proud of yourself for that.
Consistently, no relapses, absolutely none. And You know, I stand 10 toes deep on my recovery. I don't care what happens in life. Using is not an option for me.
Yeah. I'm so happy for you, Tonie. You know, you're reminding me of, I know that you're a spiritual person, so let me just say this to you. I mean, this sounds a little trite, but there's so much truth to it that God doesn't put anything in front of us that we can't handle.
Absolutely.
And I think maybe you were just finally strong enough to handle that confrontation with your family and tell the truth.
Yeah.
Might not have been able to do it before then.
Yeah. I didn't have a voice. Someone asked me, and I said I didn't have a voice. I didn't have a voice. Like, I didn't know that I had anything that people wanted to hear. I didn't know that I had anything to say that someone would want to listen to. Paul was the first person that allowed me to talk openly and freely without getting a backhand smack, without getting an extension cord beating, without getting beatings with a switch. Paul was the first person to allow me to have my own voice.
Yeah.
He was the first person to allow me that.
Yeah. And Sarah would probably say, and now listen to you.
Now I don't stop talking. Now I don't stop talking. I think that it's important to know that I'm just somebody that has chosen the route of honesty and transparency, but I'm not the only person out there that has suffered in silence.
No.
And people look at us strangely. You know, people used to see me sleeping on a park bench. And
oh, I forgot about your park bench. I wanted to talk about your park bench.
People used to see me sleeping on this park bench, but I'm a classy lady, so I'm not gonna lay down and sleep on the park bench. And I make my clients laugh when I say this. I said Miss Tonie has always been bougie-fied, because I wouldn't lay down on the bench and sleep. I would sit up and sleep.
Yeah.
I would sit up sleeping. I would see people leaving to go to work in the morning. I would see people coming home in the evening. And I was embarrassed. That's not what I ever thought that my life would be. I don't know what I thought my life would be. No one wakes up in the morning and says, "Mom, you know, I think I'm going to be a drug addict when I grow up."
Right.
We as a society, you know, I did an interview with Michelle Miller from CBS Morning News, and the interview was supposed to take place in one place, and they had set up on the hillside at the bench where I used to sleep. So again, there goes that universe providing again, right?
Yes. Yes.
I'm concerned about the layout of the neighborhood and the community wanting to know, why is all these cameras up here? And it's like, when I stepped on to the sidewalk and they saw that it was me, everybody was like, "Oh my God, I'm so happy to see you."
Yes.
There's one lady, she's a pastor, and she used to tell me every day that she parked her car, I was sitting on that bench, and she would sit in a car waiting for parking, and she would talk to me, and she would always say, "God has a plan for you. You may not see it yet, but I'm telling you, God has a plan for you." And on this day that I interviewed with Michelle Miller, this pastor was sitting in her car waiting for parking.
Oh my gosh.
Saw me come up the top of the hill. She said, "I told you, God has his hands on you."
Yes.
And I have to say, thank you, Jesus.
Yes.
Someone saw a vision that I had no idea existed. And I do my work in the communities. I take food out to the homeless. I spread the good gospel. I talk about mental health and recovery. I don't believe that you can address one without addressing the other. I say that all the time. I deal with individuals who suffer with severe persistent mental illness and substance abuse. So dual diagnoses, and they have to choose between whether or not they're going to receive psych treatment, or if they're going to receive substance abuse treatment, because this is what Medicaid is going to pay for. And when we talk about programs like the MICA programs where you can get the treatment of both. They forget to talk about the criteria that it takes to get into a MICA program. And so that leaves those that are not qualified for the MICA program to be left out and make that choice. Am I going to choose going to detox or in rehab, or am I going to choose getting my mental health taken care of?
Yeah. You know, I'm just wondering, we're kind of touching on some work you've done with Dr. Elizabeth Ford. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yes, that is I love her. I love her. I love her. Dr. Ford and I worked together briefly during her time at Cases. And when she moved on to her position with the School of Psychiatry, she invited me in one day to speak to a bunch of doctors that were third and fourth year students.
Residents or
the residents,
whatever,
interns and residents, to speak with them from the perspective of a patient, from a person that receives health services, and what I would like to see going on. And my biggest thing is I would like for you to be able to listen to your patients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not what you want it to be, mm-hmm. but exactly what it is.
That's because the best advice you could give us. Yes, the very best.
We get so caught up in wanting to fix the problem, mm-hmm. that we don't even know where the problem originated.
And it's not ours to fix.
No, it's really
our
not.
Our job is to support you so you can take the steps to do it. But if we start trying to fix you, yes, we're just getting in the way.
Yeah, Elizabeth has a lot of. I'm invited to a lot of events that she hosts. She comes to a lot of events that I am a part of. We support one another because we're both looking for that effective change when it comes down to the ways that mental health is addressed. If Paul didn't take time with me, I wouldn't have known that I'm great.
Yes.
I'm great. I am great.
I love it.
I would never have known. I started college in May. My GPA stands strong at a 4.0.
Wow.
Right now, I'm in a sociology class, and my grade right now, I have homework tonight, but my grade right now is 95.6. I'm standing strong, and I never would have known that I had it in me if someone didn't believe in me first.
Yes.
The way that I engage with my clients, not only by doing what Howie the Harp gave me, but meeting my people where they are. It's not my responsibility, and I let them know, I'm a passenger. This is your vehicle. I want you to drive your car, and I'm going to sit over here in the passenger seat.
That's good. I love that.
Yes, we're going to ride together until the wheels fall off. That is the way that I approach my clients.
You know, Tonie, you've been so generous with your time. Thank you so much. You ended your chapter in the book by saying you have some unfinished chapters. Do you want to just say a little bit about that?
Well, my chapter number 1, I want to start to look for my children.
Yeah.
I have unfinished business there.
Yeah.
I would also like to start a not-for-profit called Reconnections. I want to reconnect with my children. I'm sure that there are other moms out there. The systems are not so kind, and I don't believe that they really give moms that are suffering the time that's needed to reconnect with their children, especially newborns like mine. The goal was to adopt my children out. They gave me 18 months to get myself together. And after 25 years of addiction, where do you begin to put the pieces in order in 18 months to be able to?
You know, I could just, perhaps the reason I'm so moved by this part of your next chapters is I didn't meet my father until I was 24.
Yeah.
And he was a Skid Row alcoholic at the time. In fact, he died in that That wasn't just a low point and that he bounced back up from. That's kind of where he stayed the next 10 years of his life before he passed away. And I saw him walking up the stairs, and I just loved him. And my whole life growing up without him, when things weren't good for me, I would have this fantasy that my dad would come and he would bring me a new dress. And we had absolutely no money, so he would bring me a new dress or some new shoes or, something that I would have just cherished. And when I saw him walking up the stairs, I could see that there was never any potential for him to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And even so, but the disappointment was just overshadowed by how much love I felt for him. And I didn't even know him. There's something about that connection with your parent that no matter how much you've been loved, that's powerful. So I just support you so much in looking for your children, and I know that's important to you.
That. And it's the sad part is when I sit back and I think about going into adulthood. Paul and I were talking, and he said to me, he says, "Tonie, you still looking for validation from your mom?" And no, I'm not looking for any validation. He goes, "You are." And the reality, I am, because who doesn't want to be validated by their mom?
Yeah.
But I know that I'm never going to receive it. And so now it's just about me growing and supporting her the best way that I know how.
Yeah. Sometimes, and at least I find in myself, because I had a lot of early childhood trauma too, there's some wounds that we just have to carry with us.
Yeah.
We're not going to heal.
Yeah.
They continue to teach us. They continue to hold our feet to the ground in one way or the other. Not to say that you won't get over whatever that validation thing is.
Well, I don't think I need her validation now. And I think that I'm finally learning how to even practice my boundaries when it comes down to her, because I left her house Monday to come back to Baltimore, and she wanted me to leave her some money. And I said, no, absolutely not. I'm in New York for 2 weeks. You get money every time that I'm in New York. I never leave you without any money. And if it's not enough money for you, that's not my problem. And I had to stand on that. And so it kind of felt good to say no.
Yeah, I think that was a good point of turning from who's been whose mom,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Tonie.
Thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure to meet you and hear your story.
Thank you.
I hope we can continue to be friends. I would love to.
Absolutely. I would love that. I would love that.
To you.
Absolutely.
Okay, girl. Thanks so much.
I appreciate you.
We'll be seeing you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'll be seeing you.
Okay. So there you have it. Tonie's story. Very, very inspiring. And I'm just so grateful we were able to have Tonie come and talk with all of us. So thanks for joining us. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I know I keep hammering that in, but it would really help us out if you don't mind. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.